I tore up the letter he sent me and buried my future, all because of a lie. Not from an ex, not from a friend, but from my own mother. She paid off my best friend to destroy my marriage because he wasn't good enough for a director's daughter. If you think this is just another African family story, you're wrong. Subscribe now to follow our most powerful and emotional stories every week. I used to believe the last person to betray me would never be my mother. Under a heavy sky that promised rain, the plane touched down at Kotoka International Airport. The passengers stirred, gathering belongings, stretching cramped limbs. But Elina sat motionless in her seat near the window, her hands folded in her lap, her back straight like a pole driven deep into the ground. She stared at the fading gold of the evening sun, behind a veil of clouds, her eyes as hollow as an abandoned house. The call to disembark sounded, and only then did she rise, slow, measured, like someone walking into a funeral. The arrival terminal buzzed with energy. Taxi drivers waved signs. Family members shouted greetings. Hugs, tears, laughter. Elina moved through it like a ghost, wrapped in a white coat, dragging a single suitcase behind her. A long, olive-green scarf was wrapped around her neck, and a pair of dark glasses covered half her face despite the gathering dusk. No one recognized her. Not yet. 3 years. That's how long she had stayed away. 3 years since the wedding that never became a marriage. 3 years since she ripped apart a letter soaked in perfume and betrayal. 3 years since her mother's voice, cold and brittle as dry wood, said, "Let it go, Elina." Some names do not belong beside ours. The letter had smelled like jasmine. That part she remembered vividly. It had been folded into a neat square, slid into her medical textbook without any ceremony. No name on the envelope. But the handwriting, she knew it, like the pattern of her own heartbeat. Julian. Her fingers trembled the moment she unfolded it. The words weren't cruel. No. They were intimate, apologetic, even pleading. But they weren't addressed to her. They were addressed to Sasha, her best friend, her maid of honor. Elina had stood in the center of their wedding suite, dressed in a silk robe, bare feet on the cool marble tiles. The letter fluttered from her fingers to the floor. And in that instant, the air left the room. The floor shifted beneath her. The taste of metal touched her tongue. Julian wasn't there. He'd gone out to find surprise earrings, his note had said. But the surprise had found her first. She bent down, picked up the letter, and tore it slowly. Not in a fit of rage, but with surgical precision, like dissecting something dead. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't even finish her coffee. She packed a single bag, left the hotel key on the dresser, and walked away. And now she was back in Ghana. Back where her name was whispered behind hands, and her story had become a parable among nurses and housemaids. They said she was brilliant. They said she had cracked under pressure. They said Julian had broken her like glass underfoot. But no one really knew what had happened, and Elina intended to keep it that way. The black SUV that picked her up from the airport smelled of new leather. The driver, a polite young man named Kwabena, tried small talk. She nodded but didn't answer. Her voice still lived in a locked drawer somewhere inside her chest. When they reached the entrance to the Ghana Hearts Foundation, a 2-story sand-colored building nestled in the corner of Labadi Beach District, Elina stepped out, brushed invisible dust off her coat, and stood still for a moment. The hospital bore her father's name. He had founded it with nothing but a borrowed loan and decades of hard work. He had treated the poor like royalty and demanded that his doctors see medicine as ministry. He had died in his sleep 4 months ago. His will named Elina as director. She hadn't even attended the funeral. The main doors slid open with a hiss. Inside, the hospital buzzed with quiet efficiency. Nurses moved between patients. The reception desk buzzed with calls. It was clean, bright, filled with the smell of disinfectant and cooked yam from the staff kitchen. Heads turned. Whispers began. A nurse nudged another. "That's her," one said, barely audible. "Dr. Elina." the one who disappeared after Julian left. I thought she moved to the UK. She was in Cuba for a while, studying trauma medicine, alone. I heard she had a breakdown. I heard she was pregnant. She looks thinner. Elina heard none of it. Or maybe she heard everything. She kept walking. Past the reception, past the waiting room, into the small office that now bore her name on a brass plate, Dr. Elina Baua, medical director. Inside it was silent. She turned on the light. The walls were bare save for one photo of her father shaking hands with the president. She sat at the desk, placed her suitcase by the chair, and closed her eyes. Breathe, Elina. Breathe. But even that felt like labor. Later that day, the senior staff assembled for an informal introduction. They gathered in the conference room, 6 nurses, 2 junior doctors, a lab technician, and a financial officer. They had all dressed well for the occasion. Elina entered last. She didn't smile. She didn't charm. She only said, "I'm not here to relive the past. I'm here to serve. Let's get to work." Her voice was calm, but firm. No one dared to ask about Julian, about the wedding, about the gossip that still hung in hospital halls like dried fish. She spoke briefly about her goals, increasing rural outreach, raising standards in emergency care, and making sure her father's legacy lived on in practice, not just in plaque. After the meeting, she returned to her office. A few knocks came and went, staff with questions, updates, clarifications. She answered them all with competence and clarity, but her face never cracked, not once. That night, she didn't return to her family estate. She stayed in the small apartment above the hospital wing. It had one window and a creaky fan, but it gave her a view of the compound at night, lit in patches alive with human resilience. She sat by the window, sipping plain tea. Her phone lit up with a message from her mother, one line only. "Now that you've returned, do not embarrass the family again." She didn't reply. Instead, she turned off the phone and looked outside at a child chasing a ball near the nurses' quarters. The breeze was warm. The fan squeaked. And in that moment, she realized something the past hadn't ended. It had followed her across oceans. It waited for her in the whispers of the corridor, in the name she still carried in the ache behind her ribs. But she would not run this time. No matter what storm would come, and she could feel it gathering, she would not disappear again. She reached into her drawer, pulled out the broken chain from her wedding day, the one she never threw away, and held it in her palm. "Let's get to work," she whispered again. But this time the words weren't for the hospital. They were for herself. Under the mid-morning sun of Accra, the Ghana Hearts Foundation pulsed with its usual rhythm, sharp, urgent, unrelenting. Patients filtered in. Children cried softly behind their mothers' shoulders. Nurses hurried down narrow hallways. The air smelled of antiseptic and the dust rising from outside the open courtyard. Somewhere in the distance, a generator hummed with low mechanical fatigue. Inside, medicine was being practiced like survival, not ceremony. Dr. Elina Baua was halfway through her rounds when the emergency alert sounded. Motorcycle collision. Male mid-30s. Head trauma. Open fracture. BP unstable, came the intercom announcement, clipped and tight. Without a word, Elina tossed her clipboard onto the nurse's station and moved. Her footsteps pounded across the tile, each one pushing her deeper into instinct. This was where her body remembered how to move, how to live. When the world was blood and torn skin and urgency, there was no room for memory. She pushed into Trauma Bay 2 just as the gurney was wheeled in. Blood soaked the patient's shoulder. His eyes rolled back. A nurse tried to start a line, but missed. Elina took over. Her voice was calm but hard. "Let's go. I want an oxygen mask. Hook up a monitor. Run a CBC. Get ortho down here now." A young intern fumbled at her side. "Elina, Dr. Bawa, the consulting trauma surgeon, just arrived. He's joining you now." "Fine," she snapped. "Tell him to glove up." She turned to reach for the surgical drape when she heard the door open. The sterile air shifted. Someone stepped into the room, and just as she turned back toward the patient's head, she saw him. Julian. For a full second, everything inside her stopped moving. No sound. No breath. No blood. Just the impossible truth of him standing there in scrubbed surgical cap pulled low over his forehead, gloved hands suspended mid-motion. He hadn't aged. Or perhaps he had in all the right ways, his jaw more defined, the stubble purposeful now, eyes a deeper brown like the soil after heavy rain. But it wasn't his presence that undid her. It was that he looked right at her and said nothing. No shock, no apology. No apology masked as explanation. He just stared. So did she. Time was irrelevant in that moment. Maybe it was a second. Maybe it was 10. The beeping of the monitor jolted her. She broke eye contact first. "I've got this," she said flatly, then turned to the nurse. "You scrub in. He won't be needed." Elina Julian began his voice like a crack in stone, but she didn't give him a second chance. She stepped back from the table and ripped her gloves off. The patient was stable enough. She didn't care. Not now. She walked out of the trauma bay, out of reach. Her heart slammed against her ribs like it wanted to escape her chest and go back in time. She stormed into the corridor, eyes fixed on the far end. Nurses turned as she passed but said nothing. The doors hissed closed behind her. Back in the trauma room, Julian stood motionless. The intern glanced between the two senior doctors, then to the nurse who had already taken Elina's place. "Should we?" Julian finally moved. "I'll assist," he said simply. His voice carried no heat. But inside, everything was on fire. Elina locked herself in the small staff restroom 2 floors up. The mirror was cracked. The faucet dripped. She leaned forward, braced both hands on the sink, and stared into her reflection. Her face was calm, too calm. That was always her giveaway. The last time she had seen Julian, it had been raining in New York. He was on the front page of a Ghanaian medical journal praised for a relief mission in Sudan. She had stared at that cover in the hospital bookstore for 5 whole minutes before walking out without buying it. And now, he was here, in her hospital, in her city, with no warning, no call, no heads up from admin. Why? Why now? Why the hell had the universe decided that today of all days was the day to tear open old scars? She straightened her back and washed her hands, even though they were already clean. The water ran red, not with blood, but with memory. She would finish her rounds. She would be untouchable. No one would know what that moment had done to her. Later that afternoon, Julian walked the pediatric ward chart in hand, introduced as one of the rotating volunteer specialists from Médecins Sans Frontières. The children were drawn to him immediately. Something about his smile, calm, warm, never too loud, made them trust him. Nurses whispered more now. Some pretended not to know who he was. Others didn't bother. He knelt beside a boy with a splint on his arm and asked about his favorite cartoon. The child giggled, and then he turned into room 8, the room where everything changed. It wasn't the walls or the crib, or even the name on the door that stopped him. It was the eyes. The boy, 6, maybe 7, was sitting cross-legged on the hospital bed, building something with mismatched plastic blocks. His skin was golden brown cheeks, slightly dimpled when he bit his lip in focus. But the eyes, dark brown, almond-shaped, set just a little too far apart. Eyes he had seen every day for over a decade when he looked in the mirror. Julian's legs buckled slightly. He grabbed the doorframe. The child looked up, met his gaze, and blinked. The blocks tumbled from his lap. Julian couldn't move. "Hey, Rio," came a voice from the hallway behind him. "Elina." She stepped into view, a tablet in her hand. She didn't look at Julian at first. She smiled at the boy. "You tired of waiting for me to bring your juice?" Rio grinned, nodded, and pointed toward the plastic cup at the side table. Elina poured him some, lifted it gently, wiped the edge, and handed it to him. Then, and only then, did she glance over her shoulder. Her eyes met Julian's for the second time that day. She saw it instantly. The recognition, the confusion, the weight of it hitting him like a wave. Julian's lips parted slightly, but no words came. Elina's jaw tightened. She stepped in front of the boy, blocking the view like an eclipse passing over the sun. "You don't belong in this room," she said, her voice measured. Julian swallowed. No. Her tone was final. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't. That's the point." She turned toward the nurse's desk, placed the tablet down, and pulled the door half closed behind her. Then she turned back just long enough to add, "This isn't your story anymore," and she walked away. Julian didn't follow. He stood there, fingers curled into fists, his breath shallow. Behind the door, Rio's voice sang something in Twi, a tune his mother taught him to chase away bad dreams. Julian stayed until the song faded. Then he turned and walked back down the hallway, the edges of his mind unraveling. Everything had changed in 7 minutes, and everything else would change again. The door clicked shut behind her, muffling the chaos of the ward. Elina leaned against it for a moment, exhaling as if she had just emerged from the sea. Her eyes scanned the dimly lit room, her private quarters above the east wing of the hospital. It smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic. The curtains were drawn, keeping the harsh Ghanaian sunlight at bay. Shadows danced on the walls, long and thin, like memories trying to claw their way back into her present. She crossed the room slowly, her movements deliberate. Every step felt heavy, as if the weight of her own silence had turned into concrete. She knelt beside the narrow bed and pulled out a cedar box from underneath. The wood was old, the corners worn from years of being touched, moved hidden. She placed the box on the bed. It was locked, not with a key, but with choice. For 3 years, Elina had refused to open it. She had carried it with her to Cuba, to Sierra Leone, even to Cape Town during her field residency. But never once did she dare to unseal it, until now. With a trembling breath, she flipped the clasp. The lid creaked open. Inside, carefully arranged in painful chronology, were fragments of a life she had tried to bury. A wedding photo slightly bent at the corner. She and Julian stood under the mango tree at her father's estate, surrounded by friends and family. Her smile in the photo looked wide real. But now, it felt like a stranger's face. She held the picture up to the light. Julian's hand was resting on her waist, gentle, protective. Back then, it had felt like belonging. She placed the photo aside and lifted a white envelope torn clean down the middle. The letter, its edges were yellowing now, but the ink still screamed. The script was Julian's, unmistakably his, slanted, slightly to the right, confident, but not arrogant. She didn't need to read the contents. They were scorched into her memory. She had read it 100 times before she tore it to shreds. The name at the top still made her stomach knot, "Dear Sasha." It had landed in her hand like a grenade the day before their wedding. No envelope, just folded neatly and slipped between her bridal veil and the small notebook where she'd written her vows. She remembered standing there in her dressing robe in the bridal suite, brushing her hair, humming softly to herself. When she found it, she remembered the sound of her own heartbeat drowning everything else. "Dear Sasha," not "Dear Elina," not "My love," just Sasha. She had read the words. Apologies, regret, confession, and worst of all, love. She could still see the sentence that severed her world. "I wish things were different. I wish I had the courage to tell Elina the truth, that it was you always." That night, she didn't scream. She didn't confront. She didn't cry, not even once. She just walked into the garden behind the estate under the same mango tree, where she was supposed to say her vows the next day, and began to rip the letter, line by line, sentence by sentence. She tore it with such precision, it felt like surgery. She walked back into the house, packed a single suitcase, and left. No goodbye, no explanation. Only the letter, now in pieces, which she carried with her like ashes of a burned-down home. And she had never told anyone, never even told Julian, that she was carrying more than grief. She was carrying life. The next item in the box was the ultrasound photo, black and white, blurry. But she had memorized every curve of it. The small bulbous head, the curled spine, the shadow of tiny fingers. She had named him in silence. Rio. It was the name Julian once said he would give his son after the river in Volta, where his grandfather used to fish with his bare hands. A name full of movement, freedom, flow. She hadn't known she was pregnant until 2 weeks after she fled. The nausea hit her in Cuba while she was sterilizing surgical tools in a tent outside Havana. At first, she thought it was the heat or stress. Then, the pattern revealed itself. The missed cycle, the fatigue, the sudden rise of emotion at simple things, music, voices, smells. The confirmation came with a blood test, and then the silence that followed was absolute. She never told Julian, never even considered it. Because how could she raise a child with someone who claimed to love her best friend the day before their wedding? How could she put a child in the middle of that ruin? She had chosen to disappear instead. To raise her son in peace, even if that meant sacrificing the truth. But peace had never come. Not really. Only distraction. Only the illusion of moving forward while dragging her past behind her like a phantom limb. She picked up the divorce papers next. They were crisp, clean, official. She had filed them from a P.O. box in Mozambique, where she was doing a 6-month exchange. Julian had never contested. He had signed them and sent them back with a single post-it note. "I wish you'd stayed long enough to let me speak." She had thrown it away. But now, as she looked at the torn letter and the divorce documents side by side, something in her cracked. Had she been so sure he had betrayed her? Had she ever paused long enough to ask? Or had her mother's voice drowned out all reason? "Julian is not our kind of people," her mother had said the night he proposed. "His father sells sugarcane in the back alleys of Makola. His mother mops floors in a secondary school. What legacy does that offer you?" She had fought back, of course, argued, screamed. "He's brilliant. He saved my life when I fainted in class. He's the only one who sees me." But her mother's gaze had been like stone. "He will always be beneath you. And when he realizes it, he will resent you. Men like him don't marry women like you. They worship them from afar. Until they no longer can." Elina had thought love would be enough. Until the letter, until the confirmation, however indirect, that maybe her mother had been right all along. But now, in this quiet room, with her hands on the relics of her own brokenness, she wasn't so sure anymore. The door creaked open behind her. She didn't move. It was Mavis, the nurse who had worked for her father for nearly 20 years. A quiet woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun. "I thought I'd find you here," Mavis said gently. Elina kept her back turned. "I heard he's in pediatrics," Mavis added. Elina's spine stiffened. "You knew he was coming?" she asked, her voice low. "No. But God brings people back when there's still something unsaid." Elina turned, then slowly her eyes rimmed with the faint red of suppressed tears. "There's nothing left to say," Mavis smiled, not unkindly. "Then why are you holding the pieces, child?" Elina looked down. She was still gripping the torn letter, still trembling, still unsure. The weight of everything, the miscommunication, the pain, the exile crashed over her in waves. "I don't know what's real anymore," she whispered. "Was it him? Was it me? Was it her?" Mavis stepped forward, took the photo of the ultrasound from the box, and held it gently. "This," she said, "is real. And he has his father's eyes." Elina swallowed. The tears came then, not in gasps, not in floods, but slow and unrelenting. Not because she missed Julian, but because she had built a wall so high, for so long she no longer knew how to take it down. She gathered the items one by one and placed them back in the box, except the letter. She held that piece in her lap, her fingers gently smoothing out the torn edges. Her breath was steady now, but her mind was loud. And for the first time in years, she didn't push the noise away. She listened. Elina didn't hear the knock at first. It was faint, more hesitant than intentional. Her mind had been adrift since the box. The past had not only been unlocked, it had clawed its way into the daylight, dragged out by letters and ghosts. She had been sitting at the small kitchen table in her quarters, staring into a half-empty mug of hibiscus tea, letting the world move without her. Then the knock came again, this time louder. She stood expecting a nurse, maybe Mavis. But when she opened the door, time fractured. Sasha. There she was standing just outside the doorway, wrapped in a loose shawl. Her frame smaller than Elina remembered, thinner eyes darker beneath hollow sockets. Her once polished curls hung limp against her shoulders. No makeup, no earrings. Just a woman stripped of everything except breath. Elina said nothing, neither did Sasha. For a long, breathless moment, they stood like statues, two ends of a story. Neither had been brave enough to finish. Then, barely audible, Sasha whispered, "Hi." Elina stepped back without thinking. Not to invite her in, but because being that close to her felt like standing near something radioactive. "You shouldn't be here," Elina said, her voice low. I know. You have no right. I know. And still Sasha stood there, trembling, her fingers clutching a worn leather bag. I didn't know where else to go. You burned every bridge, Sasha. There's nowhere left. I know, she said again, and this time her voice cracked. Elina's heart pounded in her ears. She hated the way Sasha still looked familiar, the way her presence stirred something ancient and aching in her chest. 5 minutes, Elina said coldly. Say what you came to say. She turned and walked back inside, leaving the door open behind her. Sasha hesitated for half a second, then stepped through. The apartment was simple, functional. No photos on the walls, no candles, just a woman surviving. Sasha glanced around, then followed Elina into the kitchen. Elina didn't offer her tea, didn't offer her a seat, just crossed her arms and waited. Sasha reached into her bag and pulled out a thin manila envelope. Her hands shook as she placed it on the table. What is it? Elina asked. Sasha didn't meet her eyes. Proof. Elina didn't move. You once told me, Sasha said softly, that the worst kind of betrayal is the one that makes you question your own memory. That's what I did to you. I made you question everything. She slid the envelope forward. But I wasn't the one who started it. Elina's eyes narrowed. It was your mother. The room tilted. What? Sasha swallowed hard. She came to me the week before your wedding. Said you deserved someone with status, with power. Said Julian would only hold you back. That he didn't belong in our world. She told you this. She offered me money to end things, to stage something. I refused at first, but then, her voice broke. But then she threatened to cut off your father's funding for my scholarship. Said she'd spread rumors about my family, about my brother's criminal record. She said I was just a charity case with too much access to her daughter. Elina blinked, her face frozen. I didn't know what to do. So I wrote a letter to Julian, asking if he'd ever felt anything for me. I never expected a reply. I was trying to give your mother something, anything, to make her back off. She paused, then added, he did reply. But the letter was never meant for you. Elina stared at the envelope. I found it in my veil box, she said numbly. On my wedding day. Sasha's eyes filled with tears. I didn't put it there. Then who did? I think your mother did. Elina pressed a palm to her forehead, trying to breathe through the nausea rising in her throat. I didn't sleep with him, Sasha said, her voice trembling. We never even kissed. I never wanted him, Elina. I was scared and weak. And when I saw what it did to you, I knew I had lost you forever. Why now? Elina's voice was shaking. Why come back now? Because I couldn't sleep anymore. Because I see your face every time I close my eyes. Because I watched your life burn and I lit the match. She pushed the envelope closer. Inside is a scan of Julian's reply. The original. I never saw it again. But I had made a copy, just in case. Elina's fingers hovered over the envelope, then withdrew. Sasha wiped her cheek with the sleeve of her sweater. I didn't just lose my best friend, she whispered. I lost myself. And if I can't make peace with you, then I don't think I'll ever find my way back. Elina looked at her, then really looked at her. The makeup was gone, yes, but so was the arrogance. So was the vanity that used to cling to Sasha like perfume. In its place was a woman, hollowed by regret, barely stitched together by sorrow. A beat of silence, then another. Then Elina sat. She didn't touch the envelope, not yet. Do you remember, she said slowly, when we were 9, and you got your period during the dance recital? Sasha let out a broken laugh through her tears. You gave me your skirt and danced in your leotard. We swore we'd never let anything come between us. Boys, money, family? Sasha nodded. I remember. Elina's voice softened barely above a whisper. You were my sister, Sasha. I still am, she said, her face crumpling. I was just too broken to know how to be. Elina reached for the envelope and opened it. Inside was a single photocopy, slightly faded. She recognized Julian's handwriting instantly. Her eyes scanned the page fast, at first, then slower, absorbing every word. It wasn't a love letter. It was a refusal, a plea. A line jumped out. Whatever you feel, I don't return. I love Elina. I've always loved Elina. If you respect her, you'll tell her the truth. The air left her lungs. The ground beneath her shifted. Every defense she had built, every justification, every wall, all of it cracked. Julian hadn't betrayed her. He had been trying to protect her, and she had walked away without asking why. Elina put the letter down and closed her eyes. Tears slipped free unbidden. "I'm so sorry," Sasha whispered. "I wish I could take it back." "You can't," Elina said, opening her eyes again. "But you can leave now." Sasha stood nodding. Before she turned to go, she said, "I don't expect forgiveness. I only came to return the truth to the person it was stolen from." And then she left. The door clicked shut. Elina sat in the silence for a long time. Then slowly, she picked up the letter again, pressed it to her chest, and wept. Not just for the betrayal, but for the years lost to lies, for the love she never let explain itself, and for the woman she used to be so certain, so proud, so unforgiving. In the distance, somewhere outside the window, the church bells rang once then again. Elina looked up breathless. The truth had finally come, and it was heavier than the lie ever was. The storm had not passed, it had only shifted. Truth had a strange way of arriving, not with peace, but with noise. And now that it stood in her hands, Elina could no longer pretend to be untouched. She stared at the letter Sasha had left behind, Julian's words etched in ink. Refusing a love that never existed, defending a love that had been abandoned too soon. The ache that bloomed inside her chest was no longer confusion, it was fury. Not toward Julian, not even toward Sasha, but toward the one person whose fingerprints were now all over this wreckage, her mother. By morning, Elina was already at the law firm of Mensah and Aim, the place where her family had handled assets and affairs for nearly 3 decades. The office overlooked Independence Avenue, the tall windows stained with years of Ghana's heat and dust. The receptionist smiled when she entered, recognizing her immediately. "Dr. Bawa," she said, "I'm here to see Mr. Ayim." Elina interrupted, polite but unflinching. "It's urgent." 15 minutes later, she sat across from him. Kojo Ayim, silver-haired, measured a man who knew more secrets than he let on. He wore a tailored suit and an expression that suggested he had anticipated this visit. "I need you to pull all financial transactions made from my mother's private accounts," she said, "starting from 6 months before my wedding." Kojo blinked. That was over 3 years ago. "I don't care how far you have to dig. Elina, don't make me subpoena it." He sighed, steepled his fingers, then nodded once. "You'll have it by the afternoon." The file was delivered to her by 400 p.m. That fast. Which meant it wasn't hard to find, which meant it had never been buried, only ignored. She spread the documents across her kitchen table. Line after line of transfers, all in her mother's signature, neat as pressed linen. Most were routine trust fund movements, business expenses, charity donations. But one stood out. Date 6 days before the wedding. Amount 5,000 cedis. Recipient Sasha Mensima. Memo final tuition payment, university. But Elina knew Sasha had already graduated the year before. That payment didn't make sense. Then came another, 3 days before the wedding. Amount 10,000 cedis. Recipient same. Memo consulting fee. Her hands curled into fists. She read the amounts again. Cross-checked them against Sasha's story. It was real, every word of it. She sank into the chair, cold, settling in her bones. Her mother had paid her best friend to orchestrate a betrayal. Not just any betrayal, a precise, humiliating demolition of her heart. Elina didn't remember putting on her shoes, didn't remember grabbing her keys. All she knew was that she was at her mother's house within the hour, standing in the foyer of the grand family estate, where every wall was painted in pride and every picture frame a warning. "Is she in?" Elina asked the housekeeper, who nodded quickly and stepped aside. Her mother was on the veranda sipping tea in her usual linen blouse and beige slacks. She looked up with practiced calm as Elina approached. "Elina," she said, "you should have called." Elina dropped the file onto the table. Papers spilled out like spilled blood. "I'm calling now," she said. Her mother glanced down, barely bothered. "What's this?" "You paid Sasha. Twice. Once under her name, once through her brother's account." "Don't play dumb." "I never play, darling," her mother replied. Elina's breath caught. You knew what you were doing. I knew exactly what I was doing. She stood smoothing her blouse. You think love is enough, Elina. You think just because he looked at you like you hung the stars that he would survive our world. That marriage wouldn't swallow him whole. He survived med school. He survived war zones. He survived me leaving him without explanation. Elina shot back. The only thing he didn't survive was you. Her mother poured herself more tea, unmoved. I protected you. No, Elina snapped. You dismantled me. I ensured your legacy. You tore out my future. Silence. Wind rustled the curtain beside them. Somewhere in the distance, a car honked, and the weight of 3 years cracked through the stillness. You paid her to make it look like he cheated, Elina whispered. You planted the letter. Her mother finally looked her in the eyes. I did what mothers do. I saw a mistake before it could ruin you. He wasn't a mistake. He was a Macola boy with ambition and no title. What would your children have inherited? His father's sugarcane business, his mother's broomstick? Elina flinched as if slapped. They would have inherited love, she whispered. Her mother's lips curled. Love, she said like it was a slur. Love does not keep you housed when empires collapse. Love does not sit at the boardroom table or get you invited to the president's fundraiser. No. Elina said, voice shaking. But it holds your hand when you miscarry. It makes breakfast when you're too depressed to leave bed. It stays, even when the world walks away. She took a step closer. You stole that from me. You didn't protect me. You sentenced me to loneliness. Her mother exhaled long and unbothered. You're dramatic like your father. That's why he died poor. Dreaming instead of building. Elina's face twisted. He built a hospital that still heals the poor, and he left nothing for you but struggle. Elina's voice was a knife now. No, he left me integrity. You just couldn't buy that, so you tried to buy my life instead. Her mother's expression flickered just once, but enough for Elina to see it, guilt quickly buried. But it was there, and it was all Elina needed. I don't know who you are anymore, she said quietly. I'm your mother. You're a stranger who signed my happiness away for a surname that looked good in society pages. She turned to leave. Elina, her mother, called behind her. Don't walk away from family. Elina stopped at the door but didn't turn. You made that choice for me. Now I'm just following through. And with that, she stepped outside into the warm dusk. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Her thoughts were wildfire racing, scorching, relentless. She parked on the side of the emergency lot, the same place Julian's Jeep had been parked just days ago. She needed to see him. She didn't know what she would say, only that she needed to look into his face unfiltered, without the fog of lies, and ask if love had ever stood a chance. The pediatric ward was quieter now. Visiting hours had ended. Nurses moved like whispers. Elina slipped past the reception desk and found him in room 9, sitting beside a girl recovering from dengue. He looked up as she entered. His eyes lit, then dimmed, reading her face. She closed the door behind her. They were alone. I know the truth now, she said. Julian didn't speak. He waited. My mother paid Sasha. She staged it all. The letter. The betrayal. I walked away before giving you a chance to explain. I'm sorry. Julian leaned back in his chair, his features unreadable. Why now? Elina hesitated. Because lies are loud. But the silence afterward is louder. He gave a slow, tired nod. I never stopped loving you. She flinched. Don't say that. It's true. I'm not ready to believe it. Then why are you here? She swallowed. Her voice was soft. Because I wanted to be. They stared at each other for a long, painful minute. Her eyes glistened. His jaw tightened. I'm angry, she admitted. At you, at her, at myself. You have a right to be. I buried the truth to protect my pride. And now that I've dug it up, I don't know what to do with it. He stood slowly, approached her. You don't have to know, he said. Not tonight, not this week. Just don't walk away before you ask the question this time. She looked up at him, then turned away and walked out. Because even truth, when it comes too late, can still be a wound. And she wasn't ready to stop bleeding, not yet. It started with the walls. Elina stripped them first. Every photo, every certificate, every hand-drawn sketch Rio had taped up beside her dresser. She peeled them away gently as if removing bandages from old wounds. Her fingers paused at one photo in particular, her and her father laughing under the neem tree at the back of the old compound, both covered in flour from baking bread. They never got right. She placed it in a box marked Keep. The others she didn't bother labeling. It was strange how quiet the act of leaving could be. No dramatic exit, no slamming of doors. Just the slow unmaking of a life. She folded her clothes with military precision, sorted Rio's books, unplugged the kettle, and wrapped their 2 chipped mugs in old socks. It all fit into 3 suitcases and 1 hand-woven duffel. Her resignation letter was already typed. She printed it on hospital letterhead and left it on the desk of the HR director, unsigned only for a second, before she placed her name at the bottom in calm, unwavering strokes. Dr. Elina Baua, effective immediately. She didn't tell anyone she was leaving. Not Mavis, not the nurses, not even the patients. Some things were better when done in silence. The decision hadn't been impulsive. She'd thought about it for weeks, ever since the truth had come undone, like the hem of a cheap dress. She had told herself that forgiveness might come eventually, that maybe Julian deserved to be heard, that perhaps love could find its way through the ashes. But she couldn't unfeel the years. She couldn't unlive the pain. She couldn't pretend that the scars on her spirit would heal, just because the story had a different author than she thought. She needed air, real air, unfiltered by society's expectations or the shadows of past lovers. So she chose Zambaga, a village where maps lost clarity, where cell phone towers faltered and modern medicine was a luxury. She had read about it in a medical journal, how one clinic serviced 17 surrounding communities, underfunded and forgotten. The physician there had retired, and a desperate note had gone out to the charity network she quietly monitored, but never responded to. Until now, she replied. They accepted her within 3 days. Julian found out the morning she submitted her resignation. He was walking the ward when a young nurse pulled him aside, voice hushed and nervous. Dr. Baua, she's leaving. He blinked. Leaving where? Everywhere. He found her just as she was locking the storage unit outside the hospital. She wore a faded blue shirt jeans and her travel scarf. Her sleeves were rolled to her elbows. The sky behind her was thick with gray clouds, the smell of rain in the air. Elina, he said. She didn't look surprised to see him, only sad. I heard, he said. Tell me it's not true. She placed the padlock on the storage latch. It is. You're walking away from everything. From the hospital, from me, from us. There is no us, Julian. There never was, not fully. I don't believe that. She turned to face him. You're not the villain in my story. But that doesn't mean you're the ending either. He stepped closer. I want to fix this. You can't, she said simply. I still love you. And I'm still learning how to love myself, she replied. That has to come first. His face crumpled. Elina. She closed the distance between them, just enough for the words to be clear, but not enough for touch. You are not the answer to the wound I caused myself by trusting too little and walking away too soon. His breath caught. I wanted you to save me once, she said. But healing doesn't come from being rescued. It comes from facing the fire yourself. And then she smiled. Small, soft, but thank you for trying. He reached for her hand. She let him hold it, just for a second, and then she pulled away. I need to go, she said. Rio's waiting. Julian didn't follow. He just stood there, watching the woman he loved do what few dared leave, not from bitterness, but for freedom. The rain began before dawn. It was soft at first, like a whisper. Then steady, a warm Ghanaian downpour that swept the dust clean from the leaves and painted the roads, dark with memory. Rio wore his favorite red hoodie. He bounced on his toes near the front door, his small backpack already on, clutching the carved elephant Julian had once given him during rounds. Are we really going to the village today, Mommy? Yes, baby. Will there be animals? Probably goats. What about Wi-Fi? She chuckled. Maybe not. Good, he said, grinning. Then we don't have to do online school. She kissed the top of his head. We'll still study. You're not escaping that. The car that came to collect them was an old pickup with a blue tarp tied loosely across the bed. The driver was a volunteer from the Rural Outreach Program, young dreadlocked with a wide smile and a calm way of speaking. Ready, Doc. She nodded, hoisted the bags, and helped Rio into the front. As she climbed into the passenger seat, she took one last look at the compound. The gates were shut, the building quiet. She didn't expect anyone to come out and wave goodbye. She didn't want them to. This wasn't a farewell. It was a beginning. They drove in silence for the first 30 minutes. The city shrinking behind them in fragments, billboards, traffic lights, rows of shops with peeling paint and painted slogans. God is able electronics. Glory be hair braiding. Last chance pharmacy. And then came the bush. Open roads, greener air, hills like sleeping giants in the distance. Rio dozed off with his head against her arm, fingers curled around her elbow. Elina leaned her head back and watched the droplets streak the glass beside her. It should have hurt more, she thought, leaving. But the pain had burned out long ago. What was left now was clarity. In the mirror of this rain, she saw her reflection not as a woman abandoned, but as one reclaimed. She had spent too many years shrinking to fit other people's expectations, her mother's legacy, society's whispers, even Julian's gentle, well-meaning love. But Zambaga didn't ask for any of that. Zambaga just needed hands, and hers were still steady, still useful, still willing. As the truck curved along a bend overlooking a field of cassava, the clouds began to thin. A ray of light broke through, catching her face, warming her cheek. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink it away. She looked right into it, and she smiled. By the time they reached the halfway checkpoint, Rio was awake again, full of questions. Do kids there play football? Yes. Do they know about space? Some might. Can we teach them? We will. Can I have a dog? We'll see. They stopped for yam and kelawel sold from a roadside stand by an elderly woman with laughter in her eyes. Elina thanked her in Dagbani, surprising the woman into a cackle. You'll do just fine, my daughter, she said, patting her arm. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Elina believed that. As the sun began its descent behind the hills, they reached the outskirts of Zambaga. Clay houses lined the road. Children waved from the shade of baobab trees, and goats scurried across the path like mischievous spirits. The clinic stood at the center of it all, modest, whitewashed, with a rusted tin roof and a solar panel that blinked with effort. Elina stepped out of the truck boots, crunching against gravel. She didn't cry, didn't pause. She reached for Rio's hand. Together they walked toward the front doors. A new chapter, a clean page, and this time she would write it not with regret, but with resolve. Because freedom wasn't loud. It was quiet, firm, certain, and it had finally found her. The sun in Zambaga rose like a hymn. Not sharp or loud, but slow and reverent, pulling itself over the rim of the red hills with the kind of patience Elina was only beginning to understand. She stood at the doorway of the clinic every morning just before dawn, barefoot, holding a cup of local coffee in her hands. She watched the village stir, a woman sweeping dust from her stoop, a boy kicking a rolled-up rag like a soccer ball, goats, bleating hens, pecking the rustle of morning prayer, echoing from a thatched hut 2 homes down. This was not Accra. This was not cold hospital corridors or legacy-driven ambition. This was rhythm. Dirt beneath her fingernails, laughter layered with wind, a kind of healing that no textbook had ever taught her. The clinic was a modest structure, 2 rooms for consultation, 1 for recovery, and a storage closet she had turned into a pharmacy. The floors were rough. The roof leaked in 2 places. But inside there was purpose. She made rounds with a clipboard in hand and Rio at her heels, both of them wearing rubber sandals caked in earth. Rio had flourished in Zambaga. He played barefoot with the local children, his laughter ringing louder than it ever had in Accra. Within weeks, he could say greetings in Dagbani, ask for water in Frafra, and sing a local folk song he'd learned from the schoolmaster's daughter. He became her little translator, her errand runner, her apprentice. Every afternoon, he would sit on a small stool beside her at the medicine cabinet, counting pills while she filled out dosage logs. Sometimes he would draw faces on the pill packets, little cartoons to make the children laugh. The mothers would smile wide, showing missing teeth and deep lines of weathered grace. Elina treated malaria, pulled teeth, stitched machete wounds, reset broken limbs. She taught the girls about their bodies, about strength, about the right to say no. She helped the midwife deliver twins beneath a flickering lantern and stayed up 3 nights straight during a meningitis outbreak, feeding broth to a boy who no one thought would survive. He did. And when he opened his eyes and whispered, En sun zani, she wept against the edge of his cot. Thank you. The village gave her a name. Nak Pema Solma, the mother-son. It came from an old Dagomba legend of a woman born from a scarlet dawn who wandered the earth, healing the wounds of others with her hands and her silence. She did not marry. She did not settle. She simply gave. They painted a mural of her on the clinic wall, an abstract figure with arms stretched wide and rays bursting behind her. At first, Elina resisted, but eventually she stopped arguing with reverence, because for the first time in years, she felt whole. One afternoon, she was in the open-air classroom beside the village square teaching a small group of teenagers about how to clean wounds. She used plastic bottles as stand-ins for syringes and banana peels as makeshift skin. The kids laughed when she made jokes, listened when her tone sharpened. They called her Doc, like it was a badge of pride. Rio sat on the ledge behind her, swinging his legs and reading out loud from a weathered science book. His voice stumbled over words like platelet and antibody, but he kept going, determined. That was the thing about this place. No one gave up easily, not even her. When class ended, the chief's wife approached her holding a wrapped bundle. Inside was a blue scarf embroidered with gold thread. A gift, the woman said, placing it in Elina's hands. To bless your head. Elina touched the fabric, her throat tight. That night she tied the scarf around her braids and sat with Rio outside their clay-walled house, watching the stars wake up one by one. Then came the letter. It arrived on the back of a motorcycle courier, wrapped in waterproof paper and addressed in neat, familiar handwriting. Rio found it first. Mommy, he said, holding it up. From Accra. She took it with steady hands. The envelope was thin. No return address, just her name written without title. No doctor, no formality. Elina. She sat at the clinic's back porch for hours, the envelope resting on her lap, unopened. She didn't have to read it to know who it was from. Julian, the man who had once been everything. The boy who had stitched her first wound in med school. The man who had never stopped waiting at the edge of her decisions. And now, even from a distance, he waited again. She finally opened it just after dusk, as the fireflies began to flicker across the compound. Elina, I don't know where this letter will find you. Maybe by a river. Maybe under a mango tree. Maybe at the foot of a hospital bed, holding someone's hand. Wherever it is, I hope it feels like yours. I've written and rewritten this too many times. I want to tell you that I'm sorry, but I don't think that's what you need. What I need to say is, I see you. I see the strength it took to leave, the courage it took to stay away. And I see that you are becoming someone I am still in awe of, even from far away. I miss you, but I understand, so I won't ask for anything. Only this. When you're ready to speak to me, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because you want to, I'll be here, always. Until then, I'll keep your name in my prayers. Julian. P.S. Tell Rio his elephant still lives on my desk. Elina folded the letter slowly, fingers trembling but firm. She didn't cry. She didn't rush inside to write back. She simply sat beneath the stars, letting the words wash over her. Rio came and leaned against her side. She wrapped an arm around his small shoulders, kissed the top of his head. He looked up at her. Is it from him? She nodded. Do you miss him? She paused. I miss who I was with him, and who I couldn't be too. Rio nodded solemnly, as if he understood far more than his years allowed. They sat there together, silent, breathing in the scent of earth rain and possibility. Because healing wasn't loud, it was quiet, like this, like a mother and son sitting in the dark, unafraid of what tomorrow might ask, like the beating of a heart that had finally found its rhythm again. The sun had nearly bowed behind the hills of Zambaga when Elina noticed the silhouette at the edge of the field. He stood still like part of the land, tall, unmoving, his figure outlined by the soft golden light of early evening. She knew it was him before she saw his face. There was a weight in the way he carried his shoulders, the same hesitant courage he had when they first danced in med school, barefoot on broken tiles during a power outage. Rio was in the yard chasing chickens with 2 boys from the village. He hadn't noticed. Elina didn't move at first. She let the moment breathe, let the tension of years stretch between them, like fabric drying under sun, fragile, fluttering, inevitable. Then she walked toward him. The earth was warm beneath her feet. the dust rising gently with each step. Julian didn't speak when she stopped a few feet away. He only offered a nod, a quiet acknowledgement of all that lay between them. "You came," she said. "I didn't know if I should." "You always knew when." Julian looked past her toward the small hut she shared with Rio. Smoke trailed upward from the cook fire. A few children played near the clinic. The air smelled of yams and firewood. "I didn't come to disrupt anything," he said. "I just wanted to see you." To see him. Elina studied his face. Time had softened him, not with age, but with humility. He didn't come like a man trying to reclaim. He came like one trying to understand. They walked toward the boulder behind the clinic where she often cooked in the evenings. The fire crackled low. Cassava was roasting on the embers, and the scent curled between them. Julian sat first. Elina joined him. No words for a moment. Just the sound of wood settling and the wind brushing through the grass. Finally, Julian spoke. "Every day since I signed those papers, I wondered what I should have done differently. What I should have fought harder for." "There's no right answer," Elina replied. He nodded. "Maybe. But I came today, hoping I'd have a chance to try anyway." She didn't flinch. Didn't look away. Her heart beat steadily, not like the first time he returned when it had pounded like a war drum. This was different. This was peace with open hands. "Zambaga suits you," he said. "You look like you belong here." "I do. I read the article in the medical journal," he added. "They called you the mother's son." She chuckled softly. "The village did. After I delivered twins during a blackout and stitched a farmer's leg with a flashlight between my teeth." Julian smiled, the image filling his eyes. "I came," he said slowly, "to tell you something." She waited. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wooden box no bigger than his palm. Inside was a ring. Silver, plain, elegant. The stone was not a diamond, but a polished piece of sunstone orange, and warm, like fire trapped in glass. "I know this doesn't change the past," he said, "but I still believe in the future. If it's with you, I'll be grateful. If it's not, I'll still be grateful I got to love you at all." Elina looked at the ring, then at him. Her eyes didn't mist. Her lips didn't tremble. She smiled, soft, sad, certain. "I've spent so long needing someone else to tell me I was worthy," she said. "Of being chosen, of being stayed for, of being enough." Julian blinked, sensing what was coming. But in this place, she continued gesturing around them, toward the clinic, the children, the hills. "I learned something more powerful." She looked him straight in the eye. "I learned to love myself. Not in spite of being broken, but because I finally saw all the pieces." The fire popped behind them. "I don't need to be rescued anymore, Julian. I don't need to be chosen." He lowered the ring box gently onto the stone beside them. She reached out and closed it. "I'm choosing me," she said. He nodded, a slow exhale escaping his chest. "I knew," he said quietly. "The moment I saw you walk across that field, I knew the answer. But I had to ask. Thank you for asking." They sat there a little longer. No bitterness, no blame. Just two people once tangled, now unbound. With nothing left but what they had the strength to give each other. From behind them, Rio's voice rang out. "Mommy." They turned. The boy was jogging toward them, a folded piece of paper in his hand. When he reached them, he slowed, eyes flickering between their faces. He saw the ring box on the stone. He saw his mother's expression, and he didn't ask what had happened. Children always knew. He looked up at Julian. "I have something for you." Julian crouched down, letting the boy place the folded note in his hand. It was crudely sealed with tape and decorated with scribbled stars. Rio spoke clearly, deliberately. "If Mommy forgives you, I'll know. This is for when she's ready." Julian stared at the note, then looked into his son's face, the same eyes, the same shape of chin, the same stubborn gentleness. "Can I do something?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Rio nodded. Julian leaned forward and pressed his lips to the boy's forehead, his first kiss as a father. Rio closed his eyes and smiled. When Julian stood, he didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just looked at Elina one last time. She stepped forward and placed her hand gently on his chest over his heart. Then she stepped back. Julian turned and walked down the path that led away from the village, the stars just beginning to break through the sky above. He didn't look back, and neither did she. A year can pass like smoke or stone, depending on whether you're burning or building. For Elina, it had been both. 12 full moons since the morning Julian disappeared down the road that curled away from Zambaga like a ribbon left behind by wind. 12 harvests of cassava. 12 market days when the village gathered in colorful wraps and shared Mango's laughter and gossip. 12 months since she said no to being rescued, and yes to standing wholly fiercely in her own name. And now, 1 year later, the village knew her not as that doctor from the city, but as something else entirely. They called her Solma, Sun Mother, the healer. The woman who came and stayed not out of duty, but out of devotion. Not out of heartbreak, but hope. The clinic walls had been repainted in warm shades of ochre and gold, adorned with painted hands from the children she had treated. Small palm prints marked the entryway, layered like blessings. A new tin roof had been added with the help of volunteer carpenters from neighboring villages. Inside shelves were stocked with more medicine than ever before, donated through a small NGO that caught wind of her work after a viral photo. Elina cradling a malnourished baby in one arm and suturing a gash on a woman's forehead with the other. They had called it Grace in Motion. It wasn't a performance, it was just her. That morning, the village was preparing for the annual Yam Festival. Not the kind of loud commercial celebration found in cities, but a deep ancestral ritual that marked gratitude for the land and honored the women who harvested more than crops. Resilience breath, bloodlines. Elina sat on a stool outside the clinic, sewing colorful cloth masks, child-sized, embroidered with tiny suns and stitched-in names. She had taught the local seamstress how to help. Together, they made over 100. It wasn't about COVID anymore. It was about dignity, about teaching the kids to protect each other. Rio sat at her feet, drawing suns and goats and stick-figure warriors on scraps of leftover fabric. "Mommy," he asked, "do you think the other villages have a doctor like you?" She smiled. "I think every place has someone trying their best, but not someone who knows how to stitch with one hand while balancing a crying baby on the other," he teased. She laughed, leaned down, and kissed his head. The morning sun warmed the back of her neck. Not oppressive, not biting, just present. Like a friend who no longer needed to speak to be understood. By noon, the festival began. Drums, wood smoke, dust kicking into spirals as children danced barefoot. Elina walked with Rio through the village square, waving at vendors and elders. The girls from the midwife training program presented her with a carved gourd painted in her honor. A group of young men, farmers' sons of the soil, sang a Dagomba folk chant as she passed. The words caught her ear. "Soma soma ya lanioli." She came with silence, gave us light. One of the village mothers stepped forward and placed a cloth around Elina's shoulders. It was hand-dyed sun yellow with red edges. "You are one of us now," the woman said in Dagbani voice, steady with pride. "Not because you healed our bodies, but because you listened to our songs." Elina bowed her head. Tears caught behind her smile. She had become something more than she intended. Not a savior, not a symbol, just a woman who stayed. That afternoon, Elina taught a class in the open-air courtyard beside the clinic. She used rocks and leaves to explain blood types to the children. They laughed, mimicking her hand gestures, asking questions in 2 languages at once. She answered both. At the edge of the group sat the village storyteller, an elderly man with cataracts and a memory sharper than most blades. He rarely spoke during lessons, but when she dismissed the class and started packing up, he called her name. "Elina." She turned. He stood, cane in one hand, the other held out with something wrapped in cloth. "For you," he said. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a carved figurine, a woman standing tall, one arm lifted to the sky, the other cradling a child whose face bore no mouth, only eyes. "What is this?" she asked softly. He tapped his cane once on the ground. "Yoli Kanye," he said. "The one who teaches the voiceless to see." Elina blinked, stunned. "I don't deserve this." "You do not have to deserve the name you grew into," he replied. Later that evening, the singing began. It started with one voice, an elder woman with a voice like woven bark. She sang a Dagomba lullaby about the sun that lives in a woman's chest. Others joined, soft layered harmonies, notes that rose and fell like waves against history. They sang not at her, but around her. And for the first time in her life, Elina didn't resist the warmth that rose in her chest. She let herself be known, not for her pain, not for her loss, but for the space she had made of herself, for healing for others, for her own reflection. When the music faded, she and Rio walked back toward their home. He carried the carved figurine, proudly treating it like treasure. "Mommy," he said, looking up at her. "Yes, you're really happy now, aren't you?" She paused, then knelt beside him in the dust and looked him in the eye. "I'm not just happy," she said. "I'm free." He nodded like he understood, even if the full truth of it hadn't reached his age yet. She rose again. They walked in step. As they neared their door, the last of the sun dipped behind the western hills, casting the sky in orange and violet. Elina turned to face it one last time before tonight. The air was warm, her feet were tired, her hands were strong, her heart was open. And in that light, just for a moment, her eyes caught the gleam of something internal, not the reflection of the sun, but its twin, living quietly within her. The letter had sat at the bottom of Elina's medicine cabinet for exactly 1 year, folded in its original paper, no creases, no smudges, no tears. She had moved it 3 times, first into her travel bag when she left Accra, then to her bedside drawer in Zambaga, then beneath a stack of field journals behind the clinic's emergency records. Each time she thought she would throw it away. Each time she didn't. Now, on the morning of her 38th birthday, she sat cross-legged on the porch with the letter resting in her lap. The sun was still hidden behind a veil of morning mist. Rio slept soundly in the room behind her, curled around a tattered elephant toy that no longer had ears. The village was quiet, as if the day itself was holding its breath. She traced her finger along the edge of the envelope, remembering the weight of Julian's voice, the stillness in his gaze that last evening by the cook fire, the way he didn't beg, didn't chase, just offered the letter and a quiet exit. Elina opened it again. Julian's handwriting remained steady, honest. A map of a man who knew how to speak without claiming. "If you read this and decide to rip it, I'll understand. That will be your answer, and I'll never reach for you again. But if you keep it, if you keep even a part of it, then I'll let myself hope." She had kept it, not because she was ready to respond, but because something inside her refused to destroy something that still carried breath. Today was different. She unfolded the paper and read every word. No skips, no assumptions. Just full presence, just full surrender. And when she finished, she didn't cry. She simply stood, walked to her small wooden desk, and opened the brown leather-bound journal where she had written her first thoughts as a volunteer. On the first page, in neat, careful letters, she wrote, "I didn't rip the letter. I kept it, because I'm no longer afraid of what love costs. I'm ready to love again. And this time I won't disappear from it. E.B." She tucked the letter between the pages and closed the journal. And this time, it wasn't to hide it. It was to keep it safe. By mid-morning, Rio was awake barefoot and dragging a stick across the red earth, creating swirls and symbols he claimed were alien maps. His shorts were torn, his knees always bruised. He had grown taller, leaner, louder. Elina brought him breakfast cassava mash and dried tilapia wrapped in plantain leaf. He ate quickly, like he always did when he was excited about something, but didn't know how to say it yet. Halfway through, he looked up and asked, "Can I be a doctor like you?" Elina blinked. She smiled softly and knelt down beside him. "You can be whatever you want, but I want to help people the way you do. I want to make sick kids laugh and tell their moms they'll be okay." Her throat tightened. "You already do that," she whispered. He shrugged. "Not with needles." "You'll learn." He looked at her, curious. "Were you scared to be a doctor?" She thought about the years, the first patient who died in her arms, the mistakes, the long nights, the loneliness, the fire that almost burned her from the inside out. "I was scared," she said, "but I never let that fear stop me." He tilted his head. "Will it stop me?" She pulled him into her arms. "No, because you'll have me." That evening, they climbed the hill behind the village. It wasn't high, just enough to see the fields stretch out in layered green and rust beneath the orange horizon. The climb was part ritual now, something they did together every few weeks. But today felt different. Today, Elina brought the journal with her. They reached the top, just as the sun began its descent, casting golden light across the valley. Rio flopped onto the grass and began arranging pebbles into the shape of a stethoscope. Elina sat beside him, opened the journal, and reread the page she had written that morning. The wind stirred her scarf. Below them, the village buzzed faintly, laughter pots, clinking distant drumming. She looked at her son. So much had been lost before him. So much had been endured because of him. And now, because of both, she had learned how to stay. She reached into her satchel, took out a tiny paper bird Rio had made weeks ago, and folded the journal around it like a promise. Rio sat up watching her. "What did you write?" She kissed his cheek. "I wrote about the sun." "It's right there," he said, pointing to the horizon. She nodded. And now she whispered, "It's in here too." As the final rays dipped below the hills, mother and son stood side by side, one small, one steady, both bathed in gold. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Because some love stories don't end at the altar. Some begin on a mountaintop where healing isn't declared, but lived. And the heart learns that the bravest thing it can do is stay open. In the heart of Accra, just beyond the bustling traffic of Ring Road and down a quiet palm-lined avenue, stood a new building whose presence did not announce itself with grandeur, but with intention. The sign was simple, white letters carved into aged wood. No gold plaques, no flashing banners. Rio's Wing, Pediatric Center for Healing and Hope. People read the name with curiosity, unaware that it carried the weight of a story wrapped in blood, silence, and resilience. A name born not from vanity or legacy, but from redemption. Julian stood in the lobby during the soft opening ceremony, dressed in scrubs and a navy blue lab coat. He walked past the reception, past the display of children's artwork already taped to the walls. There was a drawing of a smiling boy with wild hair and a red hoodie labeled in shaky handwriting, Dr. Rio. He stopped and ran his fingers over the frame. Behind him, a journalist asked for a quote. Something about mission and vision. He gave the usual answer, improving access, building trust, investing in community health. But deep inside, he knew this wasn't about policy. This was about a child he barely got to raise, and a woman who chose herself before choosing anyone else. And in doing so, taught him what real love looked like. The wing wasn't a tribute. It was a vow. 600 miles away, on the dusty outskirts of Eldoret, Kenya, Sasha balanced a clipboard on one knee and yelled over the hum of generators. The mobile health unit she managed had just returned from Turkana. 2 cases of cholera, 1 obstetric emergency, a handful of burns from kerosene stoves. She moved through the camp like someone reborn, not in fire, but in purpose. It had taken her a long time to forgive herself. She never returned to Accra, never asked Elina for more than what was already given: the truth, the confrontation, the pain. She understood now that apologies are not a currency, they are an offering. And sometimes, even when offered with trembling hands, they aren't accepted. But they must still be given. Now she poured herself into coordination, into late-night calls, and supply chain tracking, into rebuilding her integrity, one logistics form at a time. And at night, when the generators went quiet and the stars pulled the sky open, she would sit outside the tent and whisper names into the dark. Elina, Julian, Rio, not as ghosts, but as prayers. One afternoon in Zambaga, Elina returned from the schoolyard, carrying a basket of groundnuts and a stack of Rio's art projects. When she stepped into the house, Mavis, now a permanent nurse in the village, met her at the door with a package in hand. "There's a letter," Mavis said, voice soft. "From Accra." Elina didn't ask from whom. She knew the handwriting. She'd seen it on birthday cards, on report cards, on permission slips, and perfectly wrapped gifts that came with strings invisible, but ever present. It was her mother's. She carried the envelope into her room, closed the door, and sat by the window. The sun spilled through the slats, painting gold across the wall. The letter was short. "Elina, I won't take much of your time. I know I lost the right to ask for it. You once told me that control is the opposite of love. I didn't understand then, but I do now. I watched you walk away from everything I built for you, and yet somehow you became more than I ever was. You became real. I don't know how to say this, but I'll try the only way I know how. I was wrong. About Julian, about Sasha, about what love is. You were right to leave, and I hope one day you'll let me find my way back, not as your mother by blood, but as a woman who's finally learning how to listen. Amabawa. Elina held the letter for a long time. Her fingers didn't tremble. Her lips didn't move. Then she folded it gently, placed it inside a wooden box beside the journal that held Julian's letter, and closed the lid. She didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because some forgiveness is spoken, and some is simply lived. That evening, she and Rio climbed the familiar hill behind the village. It was their place of quiet where decisions became truth, and truth became freedom. They reached the top, just as the sun was beginning to melt into the far line of the world. Rio dropped into the grass, cradling a handmade slingshot, his cheeks flushed from the climb. Elina sat beside him, the wind lifting strands of her hair into the breeze. "Did you always want to live here?" he asked suddenly. "No," she said, "but I always needed to." "Do you miss the city?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "But cities are full of noise. I think I had to lose everything loud to hear what was quiet inside me." He nodded, not quite understanding, but sensing it mattered. Then he asked, "Do you think he'll ever come back?" She didn't need to ask who. She looked out over the valley. The golden sky bathed the rooftops below in soft fire. "If he does," she said, "he'll come not to finish something, but to witness who we became without him." Rio nodded, looking satisfied. And then he asked the question that lingered, even after the wind paused. "Are we happy now?" She turned to him, touched his cheek, smiled with all the truth she had. "We're free." As the last light broke into twilight, mother and son stood together, shadows behind them, sky ahead. And in that still sacred moment, Elina whispered into the wind, the only words that mattered now. "I didn't choose the beginning, but I chose the ending. Because we don't always start where we want. But if we're brave, if we love without holding our breath, if we forgive without demanding return, then maybe, just maybe, we can end where we're finally whole."